town hall. So Catherine, take it away.
Thank you so much, April. Hi, everyone. I'm Catherine. I'm April's campaign manager, and I just wanted to thank you all so much for coming to our first town hall of the general election. Even though town halls are definitely looking a little bit different this election cycle. I'm super excited to hear from all of you, but first of all, I just wanted to lay down some ground rules so that we can make our new friend Zoom run as smoothly as possible this evening. So first of all, you guys probably know this already, but please keep your mics muted if you aren't speaking or asking a question. If you'd like to speak, you can use the raise hand function, which you can find by clicking the participants icon at the bottom center of your screen. And then on the right side, you should see a button labeled raise hand. You can also lower your hand after you're done asking your question by clicking the same button. And if you're having trouble with that, feel free to just message your question in the group chat. The chat will be open all night for questions, and we'll also be taking questions live from Facebook. So you don't have to raise your virtual hand to speak if that's not your thing. Feel free to just message your questions in the chat, and it would be easiest if you could label them, label each question with its topic. So label them education, transportation, etc. So we'll know when to bring the question in at the appropriate time during the town hall. And April and Terry will just answer your questions for you. And I'll also throw everything that I just said into the chat because I know that that was a lot. But I'm super excited for the event, and I'll hand it back to April.
Thank you so much, Catherine. And yeah, but I just really want to reiterate, this is a listening session. So I absolutely want to answer questions as best I can, especially as I'm getting to know you. But I also want to listen and I want to take notes. My team is taking notes. We've got a great team behind the scenes who is literally going to be writing down everything you say so that I can either get back to you with an answer or keep these things in mind as legislative priorities as we enter into that 2021 legislative session. So just to know, I am listening, Mill Creek. So as we begin, we have the most amazing moderator that's going to take us through the evening. We are going to segment the evening into parts so to make it easier to follow. We're going to start with education and then talk a little bit about transportation and kind of land this plane on housing, and of course have time for any other issues that folks want to bring up. So I have to introduce Terry Ryan. He's amazing. I could literally spend the next hour talking about Terry's accomplishments and the amazing work he's done for over 24 years in Mill Creek and in Snohomish County. But just to tell you a little bit, Terry is a former Mill Creek mayor. He was on city council and mayor from 1995 to 2012. He actually worked for 10 years to get the Mill Creek Town Center built. And that is just the cornerstone of our community. It's amazing. And we can thank Terry and the collaboration and partnerships that he built to do that. He also helped with the Mill Creek Sports Park, Mill Creek Fire Station, 4 neighborhood parks, and the Veterans Monument and Library Park. So he's done amazing, amazing things. In 2019, he was voted Citizen of the Year from Snohomish County. And so I can just go on and on. In addition to that, from 2014 to 2020, Terry was on the Snohomish County Council, bringing fiscal responsibilities to the city's budget. He was chairman for the county's first $1 billion budget. And he also led the county's successful new $500 million contract for solid waste long haul agreement. Terry has literally done it all. And that's why, as we are going through this night, I said, he's got to be the person to really guide us through some of these complicated issues, questions, as I'm listening and learning more. So with that, I am going to hand it over to the amazing Terry Ryan and let him start the night. And thank you, Terry.
Well, that was very kind of you. Thank you. And a lot of people helped in all those projects, but I did lead them. So thank you for the very kind introduction. Hey, I just want to, as moderator, I just want to tell everybody, we want to respect everybody's time and we'll try to finish the meeting on time if we can. We've allocated about 14 minutes for each one of the 3 topics, and we're looking forward to your questions. So I think we're going to, April, if it's all right, I think we're going to jump right into this.
Yeah, absolutely.
You look ready. Are you ready?
I'm as ready as I can be, Terry. Thank
Good.
you.
Okay, so the first topic here is education. Education, of course, is always a priority, but how do we protect the funding in a COVID recession, expand career and non-college training and partnerships, and what are the best ways to expand and fund early learning? And bear with me just a second. Oh, pre-K education. So I'm just going to throw that out there and looking forward to hearing questions from, I don't know if you want to open it up with that, April?
Yeah, no, I can talk a little bit about some of the things that you mentioned, because I think it's a great way, some great talking points. And then as folks have questions, they can throw them in the chat or raise their hand, and we can have them asked live at the town hall, kind of as if we were at a real town hall. But I think your question about where are we going to go after COVID, and that's huge, because we are going to have some real budgetary issues as we go into the 2021 legislative session. The biggest thing that I've been talking about is not cutting off our noses to spite our face. We don't need less funding for education. We can't look at education cuts. We really need to fund and invest in things that are most important, and education is one of them. COVID has opened up a lot of, it's kind of opened our eyes to a lot of issues that we have in education. A lot of disparities. And so I think as we are talking about this, we need to talk about fully funding education. And when I say fully funding, it's really changing how we look at education. So we need to look at the prototypical school funding model that we use as leaders and as legislators to fund schools, and making sure that everything is included. Nursing, mental health, the actual numbers of teachers that we have, we need to make sure that we have funding for them. Right now, the model is very outdated. So even though we saw McCleary and that lawsuit provide additional funding, it funded an outdated model. And now with COVID, we really see the detriment of having an outdated model. We don't have enough resources for mental health or for nursing, and things that are going to be really, really important as we get kiddos back to school. So that's really my focus. I've always been passionate about education by being a school board member, not just on Everett, but also in Edmond. So this has been one of my lifelong passions, is really getting education moving and moving forward. So
do we want to open that up for questions?
Yeah, it looks like we might have a question here. Oh, Michelle Nims, I'm just looking in the chat box. So the question that she has is on during this remote learning, what are your thoughts about addressing the digital divide? And we were lucky to already have started one-to-one devices here in Everett, but not all districts are in that situation. We also struggle with broadband access for all students and families, and not everyone has internet. And those that do not have sufficient broadband. There are dead zones in parts of the state. And how would you address that? I'm so happy you asked that question. And Terry, I know you're being formerly on county council. Sometimes broadband, I think, came up at the county level. I know we're hearing more about it at the state level. And we do have digital inequity and a digital divide that is really detrimental to all of our kiddos. Our kiddos in Everett are really lucky because we were able to provide one-on-one, not just laptops, but also broadband, but it needs to be in every home. And broadband no longer can be considered a luxury. It has to be considered a necessity. And I want to see it treated as a utility. So as we bring in new subdivisions, as we expand across the state because of growth in terms of housing, all areas need broadband. The same way we need sewer, electricity, gas, we need broadband. So my goal when I get to Olympia is to fully have our state connected. It's going to be an investment, but it's going to be an investment that pays dividends, not just for our kids in K-12, but also for our workforce training and other folks who are really trying to get life back to this new normal post-COVID. I just want to make sure I covered everything in your question. The biggest thing is that we need to understand that broadband is no longer a luxury. So thank you for that question, Michelle. That's awesome. And it looks like we have a raised hand.
That's me. Hi, April. So to follow up on Michelle's question, what do you think the state's role is in making sure that access to education is equitable during this time period? I mean, in addition to broadband and tech, we have concerns about special ed and English language learners getting access online, our youngest learners getting equitable access to their education online, and the additional expense that all of this is going to cost, and the expense of getting kids back into school, whether that's masks and personal protective equipment, additional cleaning, additional staff for cleaning. How do we think the state ought to be helping in getting all of this done? Thanks.
Thank you for that question. And that's a big one that we are dealing with right now, currently with our school districts. So first off, the districts have done an amazing job making sure that everyone's kept safe. So all of our staff, everyone has PPE, everyone has the right protective equipment when they are in our schools or in our district buildings. But that said, we're kind of going out in faith, hoping that we get reimbursed by the state and by the federal government for those expenses. So the state absolutely has a responsibility. The first responsibility is to work in collaboration with the feds to get additional funding for this public health crisis so that we can reimburse schools that are doing what needs to be done to keep our kiddos safe. We have to get that CARES money. We have to get additional funding to the state so that they can drive it down to the district. But that said, there are longer term issues of equity in that. And so I think when we're talking about K-12, early learners, English language learners, we are seeing that we haven't done a good job filling those needs. And really, unfortunately, I hate to always come back to money, but it does come down to money. And so as a state, we've got to prioritize what we're giving for our ELL students, for our early learners. One piece of that is bringing early learners into the conversation with state apportionment. So right now, our systems, our districts, we're only legally mandated to provide education for K-12 students and not early learning. So when we get our apportionments from the state, our funding from the state, it doesn't include early learning, and that's a problem. So we have to acknowledge as a state that early learning is a part of the learning sphere. It's a part of the scope. In addition to that, we have to not forget that we do have folks that are English language learners. We do have special ed, and that funding needs to be increased as well. We know, I was talking with some special ed leaders, community leaders earlier, we know that for the dollars that we spend in special ed as a state, it pays dividends in the future. So it's really an investment. And I think for me, going to the legislature, that mindset of investment and not just spend is going to be really important. Because it's going to help our state down the road. This cannot be a crisis that we use austerity and we pull back and we stop funding things like housing, transportation, education. We've actually got to be robust in our investments and in our thinking when we're looking at this crisis and how we're going to be after the crisis. Did I hit all your points, Jennifer? Hopefully.
I think you did. Are there any other questions? This isn't the time to be shy. I know when I go to, oh, here we go. So we have one here from, is that Marge? The question is, has the school district had opportunity to make a solid plan for post-COVID about evaluating if online learning has been effective? And for those students who have not had as good an experience with online learning due to lack of internet, or parents who are not able to adequately assist their children? That's from Marge.
That's a great question, Marge. And I tell you, not only have we made for the school district, we're evaluating that now. So we're not waiting to post-COVID to evaluate it. We had some really hard lessons, in the spring in terms of having to go to continuous learning at home quickly. And so we kind of threw everything at the wall and really tried to make things work for everyone. So we had some lessons learned. So as far from what we learned with that is we went to one system. So some of the parents on the line can kind of attest to, there was a lot of different systems. Kids were jumping on Google and Khan Academy and Zoom, and parents were like, wait, this is way too much. So as a result, we said, nope, one system. So we have one platform now, Canvas, that all the kiddos log into and do their work, and that's K through 12. In addition to that, we're taking attendance. We're checking in regularly. We've got a parent university up. We're really doing things to make sure that parents are partners in this. And I think that's going to pay dividends post-COVID. So once COVID's done, we will still be in that continuous evaluation mode in terms of what worked and what didn't work. Because to your point, some kids are not having a great learning experience, especially because that social emotional learning piece is not there. But some kids are having a good experience, and just anecdotally from some parents I talked to, they're saying, you know, my kid was being bullied, or my kid was really stressed out and anxious, and online learning is a great way for them to actually connect and focus. So we're going to take all of that and figure out how we can serve each kiddo where they're at. And I'm saying that not in the sense of pie in the sky, but just in, we are really taking this seriously, because we know that there are every kid's a different learner, and there's different ways to connect and communicate. And so we're going to really take that to heart post COVID, so that we can continue to do the stuff for the kids that worked, and the stuff that didn't, we're going to change. But that said, I don't want anybody to feel like their kids are going to be behind or left behind in this, because we are evaluating kids to make sure that they are at grade level currently, and also when the pandemic is over.
Thank you for that question, Marge.
Yeah.
So we're going to jump to, there's on the chat here, there's a question from Diana McGinnis. Says vaccines will probably not be completed nationwide until 2024. What plans should we make for students over this extended period of time?
So I just saw that as well. And so I don't want that to be the case. Part of me just goes, that can't be the case. That said, we are honestly, as a district, and I really feel confident that most school districts, we are taking what the health department says each and every day, each and every month, and following the safest health guidelines that are out there. So as those change and progress, we're going to continue to follow them. I hope that this does not extend into 2024, but if it does, just like last spring, if you would have asked me in February, hey, can you shut down schools in less than a week and transition 20,000 kids to continuous learning at home, I would have said, you're crazy. No, absolutely not. Like, who would do that? And then you fast forward to March, and we did that. And because we had to, because it was the right thing, because it was the safest thing. So I think with that same mindset, as we move forward in this public health crisis, we're always going to do what's safe for every kid. We're going to do what makes sense educationally. We're always going to provide. We're always going to serve. And kids are going to be educated. If this does go through 2024, we're going to make it work. Our kids are going to be educated. I talked to students who graduated in our class of 2020 who are now in college. You know, was it what they wanted? Did they want to miss prom? Did they want to miss, traditional graduation? Did they want to miss, all those other milestones that go with being a senior? No, but did they, and did they make it in successfully to their freshman college year? Yes. And so I say with confidence that our kids are going to be well served, no matter how long this lasts. But I also say with a parent's heart, I really hope it doesn't last till 2024. I really hope it doesn't. But that's a great question, Diana, because we're gonna keep going no matter how long.
Thank you, Dana, for that question. It's also important to remember here that we're dealing with a pandemic that happens once every 100 years. Yeah. So it's not like the Everett School Board or anybody down at the state education system dreamt up all solutions for internet and internet access and everything. It would be unreasonable to expect that all that was in place. Obviously, this will prepare us more for the next one. But anyway, we're going to jump back to Michelle. She put a second one in here, so she's a repeat customer, which is fine. Her question is, what are your top 3 priorities for education once you get to Olympia?
That is a great question. So a couple of things. One is I really am passionate about looking at that prototypical school funding model. And that's like such a wonky, big set of words. But I say that because it's really important on how we fund education, and understanding that model drives so much of the dollars to the schools, and what you see boots on the ground in your kids' schools and your community schools. The biggest piece of that that's missing, that we need to address first and foremost, is our special ed funding. It's not getting enough. And so we really need to increase increase special ed funding. So that's number one. Number two, we need to really have a hard look at our graduation pathways, and I think continue to work on increasing the multitude. And let me tell you, I am so happy that State Superintendent Reichendahl has increased the amount of pathways for our kids to graduate. It's not now just a simple standardized test or a high stakes test. You've got about 5 different pathways for kids to graduate, but I think it can be more. And talking with community partners, talking with our labor unions, talking with aerospace, I mean, there are just so many good ways to have kids graduate and to show competency. And now with COVID, one of the things it's shown us is that, you know, that 180 hours, as good as it is as kind of a metric for what kids need and how long they need to be in a classroom during a year, it maybe isn't the only metric. And so now as districts across the state, we're all looking at more competency-based credits. So ways for kids to earn credits by showing competency, not just seat hours. So I'm a big proponent of looking at that. The last thing I want to talk about, and it's a difficult issue, but you know, school bond passage, and we're one of very few states. We're one of like 4 states that does not go with a simple majority for bond passages, and that affects and impacts our schools in detrimental ways. But it also impacts our communities in detrimental ways, because when you think about a school bond passing, that increases infrastructure and jobs. And so one thing that we need more of to get out of this public health crisis is jobs. And we need more people working, and we need more infrastructure projects to make our communities better and stronger. So by working on, again, that kind of wonky little thing, we can actually have a huge impact in our communities in terms of living wage jobs, union jobs in our community, and enhancing education. So those would be my 3 priorities that I want to look at when I get to Olympia. And needless to say, I'm going to be asking to be on the education committee, because I think that I can make a big difference there.
Thank you very much for that question, Michelle. April, I want to let you know that we literally have 1 minute, but I gotta stay on task. But we did get a question here. If you could just take a quick brief at it. This is from Gregory, and he said, should our state be making a bigger investment in trade schools?
So yes, that's an easy 1 minute answer. Yes, we need to make bigger investment, and in trade schools is a good way, is kind of like, I'm going to say air quotes in trade schools, but we need to make bigger investments in things like our regional apprenticeship program, pathways to trades. There's a lot of really good ways to get students into trades. And so our state needs to invest in them. Our state needs to also make it easier for folks to access those pathways. And so I, again, have been talking with partners in the community about what that looks like, because they say all these great programs the state has, they're really hard to access, and it's hard to get a kid from point A, being maybe high school, to point B, meaning collecting that paycheck, doing that job, and doing that trade. So I really think it needs to be streamlined, but we need to make it easier and invest more.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question, Gregory. And so we're going to move on to our next topic, which is everyone's favorite topic, transportation. So as all the years I was on the Mill Creek City Council and at the County Council, that was usually people's favorite topic to talk about, whether I was in a meeting or at the grocery store. So thinking about this, the traffic is beginning to get back to pre-COVID levels. Mm-hmm. And it will get worse as our region grows and until transit is back to full capacity. Which regional priorities should receive focus and resources for safety and congestion relief? Now, just let's preface this. Transportation is really a system, and that involves the cities, the counties, the state, and the federal government. So really, April would probably address, what can the state do? And there are partnerships between the state, the cities, and the state and the counties, and even the federal government. I just wanted to preface that because people get upset about traffic, and April can't solve everything, especially when it took us 50 years to get where we are now, which isn't in a great spot. Anyway, so back to you, April. What are your thoughts on transportation?
So transportation, that is, I know in our district, in our area, that's a huge issue, especially because of growth. So I really encourage everyone to put some questions in there. And honestly, with transportation, I would love to hear what your thoughts are. So if folks on Facebook and folks in the meeting tonight have some thoughts on transportations and questions, definitely put those over. But I do want to say that one thing we need to look at with transportation is infrastructure in terms of our projects. These projects are literally, not only are they going to enhance our community in terms of us getting from point A to point B quicker, us decreasing our commute times, but it's also going to bring back our economy, because the more we have projects that are, again, good living wage, middle class jobs working in our communities, that means that folks are earning money, spending money, and it gets us back to normal quicker. So I just say that because that's the lens I'm going to Olympia with. That said, I know that for so many of these projects, we need a measured approach. We don't have a piggy bank in Olympia that we can pull from. We have a balanced budget by state law. And so we only have so much to do. We have so little to do so much with, is probably a good way to put it. So one of the things I really want to do when I get to Olympia is just keep the ball moving forward on so many of these projects, beginning, middle, and end. And that means that we have to start somewhere. So I'm going to be a big advocate of continually to design and engineer projects that we know we need in our district because of the increased growth, but never stopping, never taking this moment and saying, oh, we can't fund this, so we don't even want to think about it. No, we have to continually think about infrastructure projects, and plan for the future.
Great. And just as an example of that, April, I know we've talked about the trestle, which is of big importance to the people up in the north end. And the truth is, well, the fact is, it will cost at least $1 billion.
Mm-hmm.
$1 billion.
One
In the governor's budget, and even with all of Senator Hobbs' help, and he's been very helpful to Snohomish County, we can't even get $1 billion for all the transportation projects in Snohomish County. So, as an example for the trestle, that is a state route. So, how would you approach that?
Yeah. So for me, for the trestle specifically, it's all about the federal matching dollars. So, one of the things when I get to Olympia, one of the things I love about serving the legislature is that it's a team sport, right? So I'm going to be working in collaboration with my fellow legislators, but also as a legislature, we're working in collaboration with the federal government. And one thing that we really need to focus on is not just the money that our state has for projects like the trestle, but federal matching dollars. In the meantime, what can we do? Well, that's what I'm talking about with that measured approach. The trestle is something that we need to start that design and engineering phase on it. That's a phase that's not very expensive, but once money, and I have absolute faith and hope that we are going to come back stronger from this pandemic than we went into it. Once we come back and we do have the funds, and then we have the federal matching dollars to match those funds, we're going to have a plan. And so for me, it's going to be all about that plan, all about engineering and designing what it's going to be, so that when the money comes in, we will have an actual plan to move forward on. So the trestle is a great idea because that $1 billion, that's a lot of money. And if I go into 2021, the session with my colleagues and my team sport, and they say, hey, we need $1 billion right up there, we're going to do it. It's probably not going to be a yes. But if I say, look, let's work in collaboration to get some funds, small amount of funds moved so that we can start designing and engineering it, that's a much easier conversation.
I can tell you from 24 years of work on transportation, that is a great approach, April.
Thank you.
You're going to need federal money, and the Fed's going to say, what are you putting into it? And it all starts with the design, right? So you're on the right path. Thank you very much for answering that. And I see David Simpson has his hand raised. So we better go to David. David, do you have a question?
Yeah, but it's a question, kind of overall question, if I can ask it. I just didn't want to type it in. So I just want to ask April, during these uncertain times, what role will you take in your competing with the other legislators for COVID recovery dollars for your district?
Yeah.
Washington Olympian.
So I'm thinking it's either going to be, arm wrestling or some kind of rock, paper, scissors. No. So come on, just a giggle from somebody on this one.
Well, let me preface that, because one of the things that Lori Jenkins and her team, including John Lovett, is going to be listening to all of the 98 legislators about funding for their district.
Absolutely.
And the 44th district is one of the powerful districts, just like the 38. We're all going to be competing for dollars, and our legislators going to be asking for dollars. So education, transportation, whatever.
Yep.
There's a role to play.
No, absolutely. So like I said, it's a team sport. And so I am absolutely going into serving as a team player. And just because of just what you said, David, because we're all going to be in there fighting for a very, very small pot. The 44th, the first thing I'm going to really emphasize, and I have been emphasizing even on this campaign trail, is the data. And the data says we are the fastest growing, one of the fastest growing counties, but also we have some of the fastest growing cities within our 44th district, Lake Stevens being one of them. So I really need them to understand the importance, and the reason why we're growing is because people all want to live here. It's an amazing place to live because of our schools, because of our amazing, quality of life, clean air, but we have to keep those things. And we also have to make it easier for folks to commute from point A to point B. That said, working in collaboration with my other, with not just, what was I going to say? Not just with my seatmate. So my seatmate's going to be John Lovick. He's amazing. He is absolutely, Representative Lovick is the most amazing legislator we have right now in Olympia. And so being able to be mentored by him, being a seatmate with him, and following his lead is going to be my #1 priority. After that, though, I'm telling you, talking with other legislators, and because Representative Lovick has done such an amazing job for the 44th district, he's created amazing relationships. So my fellow legislators in the 38th, my fellow legislators in the 21st, my fellow legislators in the 1st, all of these neighboring districts, we're going to all be working, and I'm not going to see it as butting heads, but collaboratively to bring back, a sense of normalcy and really bring home the bacon to our districts that all touch each other. And just to give you an idea of that collaboration, as a school board director, it's somewhat of the same, right? So I'm dealing with districts, North Shore District, Mukilteo, Edmonds, Marysville. We're now working in collaboration like never before because of this public health crisis. That same collaborative spirit I'm bringing to Olympia, and I won't have to arm wrestle my fellow legislators. We're going to all be bringing home the bacon, right, for our districts. But I say that knowing that it's going to be a much smaller pot, and it's going to be really, really hard decisions to be made. But I know because of the 44th and because of the importance that we are in our state and our state's economy, that I will be successful in bringing about real successes for the district. And I'm talking about the whole district. Even though we're Mill Creek centered and heavy tonight, the whole district is something that's always top of mind for me when I look at legislative priorities.
Well, yeah, your future mayor, Stephanie, is sitting there. She just listening to you. So.
I know, our current mayor and our future mayor. I tell you, Stephanie and Brian are a powerful team in Mill Creek. So I am excited to have them in the city. It's awesome.
Thank you, Terry, and thank you, April, for answering.
Thank you, David. And thank you for your public service.
Yes, thank you.
Diana McGinnis has a question. How do you feel about a state bank to help fund transportation projects?
So that's a question I might actually have to take a pass on, Diana. I am familiar slightly with state banks. I'm not familiar, and I'm familiar with how we currently fund our transportation projects. And I know that we sorely need potentially some new funding sources. That said, I'm not gonna get over my skis on this one. I am gonna kind of maybe just ask my team to write that down, and maybe I'll get back to you offline on that one. But I will say that I understand where you're going with it, and my small knowledge of state banks and my kind of my shaking my head, kind of there might be a conversation there, because I think we're going to be looking at some untraditional funding sources for traditional projects. So I want to get back to you on that one, but thank you for asking that, because
have a conversation with Bob Hasagawa, and
yeah,
you'll learn everything you need to know about
I was
state
gonna,
banks.
okay, so that I kind of like was writing that down because Bob Hasagawa has reached out to me, and there's a couple of legislators who are really well versed in things. Like for him, it's the state bank, and there's a couple other folks who I'm actually kind of talking to about that. So thank you for that, because now I've got a constituent asking a question, and it's a lot easier to frame my please meet with you email when I say it's because a constituent asked me.
I
So
would rather you meet with Bob Hasagawa than with me.
oh, absolutely. No, so I will definitely do that. Thank you, Diana.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dana. It looks like that's the last chat question, but I know there's other people on here that might not be typing out their question. Do we have any questions from anyone? If
Oh.
not, I'm going to put somebody on the spot.
John just had his hand up. Oh, do you have one? Oh, wait, Terry, I think there's one in the chat for John, from John.
Oh, my apologies. I'm not
Oh,
seeing.
you know what? Sorry, it's in my chat. No, it's my bad. Okay, so now that businesses have seen the benefit of a remote workforce, are there incentives or other opportunities that Olympia can provide to businesses to promote more and more remote workforce utilization? This could reduce traffic congestion. That's a great question. I know, and I say that because I haven't thought of the state getting involved, because so many questions. I always say kind of, the state can play that carrot or the stick role, right? They can say, yep, we want to incentivize you and give you grants and give you matching dollars and like have you do something that's really amazing. And then there's a stick role, right? Like, if you do this, we're going to take this stuff away. I think when it comes to remote workforces and utilizing them more, and especially in specific communities, I think there could be a role for the state to play in that. And I actually would love to kind of put that on my mental checklist of things to talk about further, because I hadn't thought of it. But now that you say it, and I'm thinking, and I'm also thinking about it in that carrot sense, right? So we've got a lot of companies, and thankfully not in the 44th, but statewide, who are talking about, we were going to move into this area. Now we're not. We were going to lease this building. Now we're not. Now we're going to do this remote thing. Well, let's work with those companies, right? Let's really figure out how we can still keep them in the community, keep their dollars in the community, keep their workforce in the community, even if they are working in untraditional ways. I know, specifically folks might be thinking about Bellevue and that REI headquarters, and it sounds like Facebook is going to be coming in there. So that was a happy ending. I'm hoping a potential happy ending for that specific large structure, because a lot of small businesses made a lot of decisions about thinking they were going to have REI's workforce in that specific space. Unfortunately, that's probably going to happen more as we get further into this public health crisis and workforces are being told, hey, stay home till January. That said, I love where you're going with that, because I think there is a role the state can play in having these conversations with private businesses about, well, how do we make this work? Now, if your new if your new normal for your workforce is X, how do we incentivize and enhance X so that the communities aren't negatively impacted? Because at the end of the day, that worker, right, they still need a cup of coffee. They still need to go out to lunch. They still need to do those things, get their dry cleaning done. It might be a little more dispersed, but as a state, how do we get in there? So we're writing that one down, John, because I like that. I like where you're going. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is a natural break point to just go on to the next subject, or topic, which is housing. So regarding housing, the housing crisis is actually getting worse as buyers, as lower income workers are impacted by the COVID layoffs and furloughs, and affordable housing remains difficult to secure for those living on the margins. How should we address the affordable housing shortage? I can tell you from experience, it's not an easy answer, but I just wanted to throw that out to you, April, and see if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, and I definitely do. And I think having this town hall be specific to Mill Creek, I knew housing would be a hot issue. We are a community that's growing by leaps and bounds. And I just really want everybody to know that I acknowledge that. And I do acknowledge the need for more housing. And most of that is because we do want to grow as a community. We want to grow, we want to prosper. And as a mother, I want my kids to live here. I want my adult kids to be able to afford to live here. And so I think the conversations we have about housing needs to be on many fronts. One of the fronts I want to talk about is increasing density around transportation hubs. And as we look at light rail coming to Linwood, and potentially having, knock on wood, an orange line of the Swift bus coming down and maybe helping get our folks here in Mill Creek to that Linwood Transit Center. Well, let's talk about housing and the families that could potentially live around a transportation hub like that. And they would live around there, work around there, spend their money around there, support small businesses around there. It's, housing doesn't have to be a negative thing. I will say that being in the Mill Creek community and loving the quality of life, we're not talking about putting, multifamily housing units in traditional single family areas, but we are talking about acknowledging the growth that we have and increasing density where it makes sense and supporting that density. So as a state legislature, not just throwing that on the cities to say, oh, do what you can and figure it out. No, it's supporting that density from a state perspective, again, with those carrots and with those incentives and with those grants so that you have the funds and the resources necessary to support growth. So, but we do need to acknowledge it because honestly, the growth is going to make us stronger.
Great. Let's see. That's a great opening. So I don't see any questions regarding housing, although I know that's a big subject. Are there people that are online that would like to just verbally ask a question? If not, I can easily put someone on the spot.
Well, that's dangerous, Terry, because you know everyone.
Mayor Holtzclaw, you might want to chime in.
Oh, well, actually, Mayor Holtzclaw had to leave early. He definitely said thank you for the forum, and he said he had to leave a little bit early. So, see, maybe he knew you were going to put him on the spot, Terry.
Yeah. No, he didn't.
He's known you for a while.
By the way, he's doing a great job on Mill Creek, as is Stephanie. You brought up a really good point, April, about the infrastructure, right? Because we can't keep just going out wide. We're going to have to go vertical. And I love your strategy about putting multifamily housing on the main streets where the transit already exists. Mm-hmm. It just makes sense, right? Because if we can get the transit, people into the transit and have it predictable, like the Swift line, then they can get over the Linwood Transit Center and be down to down into South Lake Union and eventually over to the east side if that's where they work. That's a great plan. Hold on a second here. Oh, it's interesting. Marge says, I think Robin McGee has a question. She's been waving her hand. My apologies, I can't see that.
It's okay. So I did have a question, but I think you just answered it. Actually, my question was, I'll tell you what it was, and maybe you want to elaborate on it just a little bit, is if you were to put multifamily housing or more affordable housing in the Mill Creek area, where would that be? And it sounds like your answer was, on the transit lines. Maybe are there any other areas, and is there anything you want to elaborate along the lines of location?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And it's one that I think we are looking at, and it got kind of put on pause by COVID, but as Mill Creek City Planning was looking at kind of our comprehensive plan, and part of that was driven by the orange line coming. So I think so much of it for me, and when I look at increased density and vertical housing opportunity, I think it really is driven by transit. And so much is going to be driven by that potentiality for the orange line and getting folks connected from point A to point B. One thing I don't want is for folks to think that would seep into the traditional neighborhoods. I think that we really need to keep all of our cities, the nice, lovely, wonderful places that they are, because that's why we're living here. But we also need to acknowledge that they need to grow in places that they make sense to grow. And honestly, if we don't plan for it, it's going to do it by itself.
Okay, great. So one of the people I'm going to put on the spot. Oh, by the way, very sorry, Robin. I didn't see your hand wave. My apologies.
And it looks like Stephanie, she wants to talk.
Yeah, I was going to put her on the spot anyway. I think she sensed it. So Stephanie, let's put you on the spot. Do you have anything to say about the housing?
Yes, I wanted to elaborate on what April was just saying, and hopefully my internet connection's been acting up, so hopefully it doesn't cut me off in the middle of this. one thing we've been working on is the Mill Creek Boulevard sub area. And we've been working towards progressing on ideas and planning towards what that might look like in the future. And we're kind of still in the phase where we've got a group together and getting ideas and opinions. So hopefully the whole council has to decide this, but hopefully one thing they'll agree to move forward on is to have a couple of different scenarios that shows us what it will look like with different density in that area, so that we can have the information and tools available to us to make a proper decision on its impact on our infrastructure and what will be needed in Mill Creek for that area. So that is something that we're working on, and that sub area is right there at 164th.
Yeah.
Those of you, I don't know if you're familiar with, like, you kind of come in like behind the Safeway and drive by, and it's not really that attractive right through there to ride by the back of the Safeway. So it kind of that whole area, and it actually crosses over 164th and then goes all the way down past City Hall and covers the post office. So that's something that we're starting to have a discussion on how we can reimagine what that would look like. And we're going to be needing lots of input from the public on what they would like to see there. And so that is hopefully going to start to address a little bit of this topic that you were discussing. So.
Yeah, and that was what I was thinking too, was that comprehensive planning, and that we have this amazing designer that was taking community input, and then COVID hit. It felt like everything got put on hold. I'm like, whoa. So, but there's gonna be some really good opportunities, I think, for just reimagining what we think of that area, that Safeway area, because that's oh my gosh, Terry, you probably know, what, 25 years old, maybe more.
Well, I've lived here for I think about 28 years, and it was already here.
Okay, so it's probably closer to 30 years. I mean, and the leases are coming up, and I just think it's an opportunity to reimagine. But, and I think to John's point, right now, because of the crisis, we're reimagining work, and we're reimagining workforce. And so everything kind of gets put into play when we start talking about that, because the fact that we're doing school and work 100% from home for so many months, that could really impact how we think about comprehensive planning and what we want in kind of our corridors for cities. So.
Great. One thing I wanted to mention, because Stephanie brought this up, that whole Mill Creek Boulevard, and I'm glad it's being studied and whatnot. One of the complications there is if you take those buildings down because of North Creek there, then you have a greater setback. So you can't build a building as close to the creek as those are, which is problematic. But nonetheless, it's not insalubrious. They're going to be able to find a way. And how do we do that? And I'm glad that they're already working on that. Also, April, I wanted to ask you specifically about Mill Creek. So the problem with 164th is that there's too many cars on it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the reason that happened, just to let you know, is probably about 35 years ago, the county had planned on 180th being a 5-lane road from the Both River Highway to Alderwood Mall. It didn't happen for a lot of reasons, and it can't happen now because of the wetlands and whatnot. So to widen 164th from the Both River Highway all the way up to 36th Avenue in Linwood to a 7-lane road is a $200 million project.
Wow.
And the county certainly doesn't have that money. The county, for what they need to do in the next 20 years, is $100 million short. So the state's going to have to get involved, and there's going to have to be partnerships and whatnot. But if we could expand that, then we can go back to your idea about the transit, because then you'd have transit lanes, so they're not stuck on 164th like everyone else is at rush hour. Can you comment on that?
So yeah, and to me, that's a perfect example of why we need to take this moment to plan. So if we could actually plan and design that specific route, it's going to come into perfect connection with Mill Creek doing our comp plan. It's going to come into connection with Sound Transit doing their plan about the Swift line. And if we say, okay, now this makes sense, well, now you're opening yourself up to more matching funds and more folks getting involved, because you can see the benefit in the plan. Now, will we be able to execute it during a pandemic or immediately post-pandemic? Maybe not, but you can definitely see the benefits of the design and engineering of it now, so that it'll pay dividends when we do have the funds available. But in the meantime, it doesn't mean that we're sitting on our laurels with a plan like that, because I get excited because personally, I want to get to SeaTac on light rail. right? Like that is just completely honest, and I'm super selfish, and I want to get on that orange line, get myself to the Linwood Transit Center, and get myself to SeaTac, and visit my family back in Chicago in a very simple manner, right? And so that said, I'm willing to wait a little bit. And I think that when you have that kind of passion and that kind of understanding of what it means to a community, and that's what I'll be bringing to Olympia, I'm going to be really engaged in finding us those matching dollars and getting us engineered and designed and getting it done in a timely fashion. So, but I'm glad you brought that up, Terry, because that's kind of one of my dream projects to have done so that we can access that Linwood Transit Center.
Well, this is one of the reasons I'm supporting you, April. I really, I appreciate your thoughts and your ideas and the partnerships. That just to let you know, I personally put money in the county, Snohomish County budget to begin that early design. And I shouldn't say design work. There's something you do before that. We put in, I think it was about $500,000 to get the early work done, and then we can put it on the 6-year TIP for the county. But the city's involved. The city will have to take care of the city portion. So the bottom line is it's a partnership, and you're right. We have to start with the design first. So we do have the luxury of 4 more minutes on housing.
Awesome. Well, oh, did you have a question? I think John did you have your hand up, John?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. I do have a quick question, and it's on housing. And I'd like to get your stance on this. And I know that as you're talking about the challenge that we're having with housing is housing for, when you said your children could be able to afford a home in your neighborhood. And that is a challenge. And that's a lot of what Seattle has been facing for years. And a lot of people are confused about the difference between low-income housing and affordable housing. Mm-hmm. Low income, obviously being for low-income subsidized type of housing. And this new rationale of affordable housing, which is a housing which is designed to be for people who make 60% of the mean income of the area where the housing is going in. Yep. And the benefits to that housing, really what promotes it is what benefits the state allows and gives to the contractors who build affordable housing, and what support they give those contractors to make it financially attractive for them to build affordable housing. Mm-hmm. Right now, it's the best gig in town is to build low income, not necessarily the best thing for a lot of communities. It's good to have it for those people who need it, but at a certain point, what you really need is affordable housing, because a lot of people in your area don't qualify for low income. And so affordable housing for our postal workers, our teachers, the people, the policemen, firemen, that type of individual that's making that kind of income level. And I'm curious about your stance on the support from the state to affordable housing support.
Well, and I think you hit on it just in the distinction, and so many people don't make the distinction. So they think kind of affordable is low income and low income is affordable. And I always like to say affordable housing for me is really workforce housing, right? So these are folks who are they're earning that minimal salary in a workforce. And the nice thing is that the affordability is really tied to the income averages where it is, right? So it's not that it's affordable in Phoenix, that's not affordable in Seattle or affordable in Mill Creek, right? So it's affordable where it is. And so making that distinction is super, super important. The other piece of it is what you described is the missing middle. So it's that missing middle between your traditionally priced and maybe traditional salaries in low to no income. There's that middle that a lot of us fall into. And I like to say workforce, and I like to say, folks starting out in my kiddos, but honestly, it's a lot of us. I mean, we're just working class folks who are just trying to pay, get into a housing market. And for my family, we were lucky enough to buy our first house 20 plus years ago. So ergo now we're kind of where we are, but folks who are just coming in are looking at these prices going, are you kidding me? So I think what we need to do is make that distinction, and B, as cities and as a state level, incentivize more workforce housing, because if we don't do that, we're not going to continue to grow in sustainable ways. And the bottom line for me, and as a candidate, and if you guys have followed me long enough, I'm a housing first candidate. I truly believe that until someone's housed, you can't take care of anything else. If you don't have a roof over your head, you can't focus on education, you can't focus on finding that job, you can't focus on substance abuse, and it's really hard to focus on your kiddos. I mean, so you need to have a place to live. And then as communities and as community leaders, it's our responsibility to figure out what that looks like where we are. And so again, it's not one size fits all. all. It's not all low income. It's not all market rate. It's going to be a mix, and we have to be intentional, and we have to do it with integrity as leaders. But we have to your point, John, explain that there are differences and not ignore that missing middle. So as a state legislature, I'm always going to be advocating for housing solutions, but also making sure we always remember the missing middle, because without that middle, our communities will not grow and they won't thrive. So thank you for bringing that and pointing that out.
We need your support. We need your support.
Thank you. Yeah, well, and I need your guys' support. This is, yeah, it's huge to be able to talk with constituents about these issues, and then have it hopefully vector out, because it's there's so many important things going on.
Thank you, Councilmember Steckler. It's good to see you again. By the way, over your right shoulder, it looks like a bunch of Mill Creek City Council binders. I had about 30 of them. I finally.
That is what they are, and then more work for City Council back there too.
I know you're doing your homework. Well done. And I also want to thank everyone for participating in this Zoom meeting. It's not over yet, but April, we are nearing the hard stop at 7:35. So I'm turning this over to you. And I think you're a great candidate. I think you do a great job in Olympia. I don't endorse everyone who approaches me, but I'm proud to endorse you. And I'll do everything I can to help you. But at this point, I do want to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Terry. And thank you everyone for being here. Terry, thank you for moderating this conversation. You were literally my first call when I thought about doing a town hall and what it meant and moderation and in this new virtual world. I was like, I got to call Terry Ryan. So I thank you for doing this. It's huge. And your support means the world to me. And thank you to our city councilors, Mayor Pro Tem Stephanie Vignal, and of course, John Steckler, city council members of Mill Creek, and Mayor Brian Holtzclaw had to jump off early. I just want to kind of end this with a couple of things. One, I would love all of your support. I'm doing these town halls to listen. I want to hear from you. If you have more questions, please email me at aprilberg.com. Super easy. So that's number one. Number two, if you want to support my campaign to get me to Olympia to do all these amazing things that I talked about, go to aprilberg.com. You can find out more about our upcoming events, as well as donating to the campaign. In this new virtual normal, it costs a lot of money to campaign, because I've got to pay a lot of money for flyers to go to all of your doors because I can't doorbell. So I just want to put that out there. But lastly, each and every week, you can find me on Facebook and on our webinar Kitchen Conversations series. So if you just go to my Facebook page, you like April Berg, elect April Berg on Facebook, every week, Tuesday at 3 p.m., you'll see a conversation with me and city leaders and community leaders about important issues. The next one is on the 22nd, and it's at 3 p.m. It's called The State of the City. It's with 3 amazing city councilors, including City Councilor Stephanie Vignal. We have Snohomish City Councilwoman Linda Redmond, and we also have Lake Stevens City Councilwoman Mary Dickerson. So we're going to have an amazing conversation about the states of all 3 of those cities. So please, please, please tune in. And with that, I'm just going to say thank you so much for all of your support being here tonight. These amazing questions. Definitely email the campaign if you have questions, and just have a great rest of the night, and please stay safe out there. But thank everyone for coming. Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.